They called me trash for being autistic. Today I own the building they work in. I never imagined that being called trash would become the fuel that drove me to build a multimillion-dollar empire. My name is Marcus. I'm 28 years old, and I'm autistic. For most of my life, people saw my autism as a limitation, a problem to be fixed, or worse, a reason to treat me as less than human. But today, I want to share with you how those same traits that made me different became my greatest strengths. Before I continue with this story that completely transformed my life, if you believe that our differences can be our superpowers, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories about overcoming challenges and finding success. Your support means everything to me and helps spread awareness about autism and neurodiversity. It all started when I was 12 years old. I had just been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and my parents were still learning what that meant. I was in 7th grade at Jefferson Middle School, and I was struggling to fit in. My autism made social interactions incredibly difficult for me. I couldn't understand sarcasm, I took everything literally, and I had very specific interests that consumed my attention completely. While other kids were talking about sports and video games, I was obsessed with patterns, numbers, and specifically how buildings were constructed. I would spend hours studying architectural drawings, memorizing building codes, and analyzing the structural integrity of every building I encountered. My teachers thought it was weird. My classmates thought it was boring. But for me, it was fascinating. The bullying started almost immediately after my diagnosis became known. It wasn't just the typical middle school teasing. It was cruel, systematic, and relentless. There was this group of kids led by a boy named Derek Thompson. Derek was everything I wasn't: popular, athletic, charismatic, and cruel. He seemed to take personal pleasure in making my life miserable. Every day during lunch, Derek and his friends would surround my table. They would knock my carefully organized lunch off the table, scatter my architectural books, and call me names. But the worst part wasn't the physical harassment. It was the psychological warfare. They would imitate my stimming behaviors, mock the way I spoke, and constantly remind me that I was different in the worst possible way. The word trash became their favorite insult for me. "Here comes the trash," they would say when I entered a room. "Trash doesn't belong here," they would whisper during class. "Even trash has more value than you," Derek would say with a smirk that still haunts me today. The teachers either didn't notice or didn't care. When my parents complained, they were told that boys will be boys, and that I needed to toughen up and learn to fit in better. The school counselor suggested that maybe I should try to be more normal and less obsessive about my interests. But the breaking point came during our 8th grade science fair. I had spent months working on a project about sustainable building design and energy efficiency. I had created detailed models, complex calculations, and innovative solutions that I was genuinely proud of. It was the one area where I felt confident, where my autism actually helped me see patterns and solutions that others missed. On the day of the science fair, I arrived early to set up my display. Everything was perfect. My models were aligned precisely. My charts were color-coded and organized, and my presentation was memorized word for word. I was actually excited to share my work with others. But when I returned from the bathroom, I found Derek and his friends destroying my project. They had knocked over my models, torn my charts, and were laughing as they stomped on months of work. When I tried to stop them, Derek pushed me down and said, "This is what happens to trash. It gets thrown away." I'll never forget the feeling of helplessness as I watched my work being destroyed. But what hurt more than the physical destruction was the realization that no one was going to help me. Students walked by and pretended not to see. Teachers were conveniently absent. I was completely alone. That night, I cried myself to sleep. I begged my parents to homeschool me, to move to a different town, to do anything to get me away from that place. But they convinced me to stay, to finish middle school, to not let the bullies win. They didn't understand that the bullies had already won. They had broken something inside me that I wasn't sure would ever heal. High school was supposed to be different, but it wasn't. Derek and his friends continued their harassment, and the word trash followed me everywhere. I became increasingly isolated, spending most of my time alone in my room, studying building codes and architectural principles. My parents worried about my social isolation, but I found comfort in the logical, predictable world of construction and design. During my junior year, something changed. I discovered that our city was planning to build a new community center, and they were having trouble with the design. The proposed building had serious structural flaws and energy inefficiencies that would cost the city millions of dollars in the long run. I spent weeks analyzing the plans, identifying problems, and developing solutions. Finally, I worked up the courage to contact the city planning department. I was terrified they would dismiss me as just another weird kid, but I knew I had to try. I submitted a detailed report outlining the problems with the current design and proposing alternative solutions. To my amazement, the city engineer was impressed. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the head of the planning department, called me personally to discuss my analysis. She said my insights were remarkable and exactly what they needed. For the first time in my life, someone saw my autism not as a limitation, but as an asset. Dr. Martinez invited me to present my findings to the city council. I was terrified, but I knew this was my chance to prove that I wasn't trash, that I had value, that I could contribute something meaningful to the world. The night of the presentation, I walked into the council chambers to find Derek and several of my former classmates in the audience. They were there with their parents who were involved in local politics. Derek smirked when he saw me and whispered something to his friends that made them laugh. I almost turned around and left. The familiar feeling of being an outsider, of being judged and found wanting, overwhelmed me. But then I remembered all the hours I had spent studying, all the patterns I had identified, all the solutions I had developed. I took a deep breath and walked to the podium. My presentation was flawless. I spoke for 20 minutes about structural integrity, energy efficiency, and sustainable design. I showed them how my modifications would save the city over $3 million in construction costs and reduce energy consumption by 40%. I answered their technical questions with confidence and precision. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Dr. Martinez started clapping, and soon the entire council was applauding. The mayor stood up and said, "Young man, this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking our city needs." But the best part came after the meeting. As I was packing up my materials, Derek approached me. I braced myself for another insult, another reminder that I was trash. Instead, he looked uncomfortable and said, "That was actually pretty impressive." It wasn't an apology, but it was the first time he had ever acknowledged that I might have value. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. The city implemented my design recommendations, and the community center was built according to my specifications. When it opened 2 years later, it won several awards for innovative design and energy efficiency. My name was on a plaque in the lobby, recognizing my contribution to the project. But that was just the beginning. Word of my work spread, and I started receiving calls from other cities, architects, and construction companies. They wanted my insights on their projects, my ability to spot problems that others missed, my innovative solutions to complex challenges. I realized that my autism, the thing that had made me an outcast, the thing that had caused me so much pain, was actually my superpower. My attention to detail, my pattern recognition, my ability to focus intensely on complex problems for hours at a time, these weren't weaknesses. They were strengths that the world desperately needed. During my senior year of high school, I started my own consulting company, specializing in sustainable building design and energy efficiency. I worked with architects and engineers to identify problems in their plans and develop innovative solutions. My autism allowed me to see patterns and connections that neurotypical people often missed. By the time I graduated, I was already earning more money than most adults. I used my profits to invest in real estate, focusing on undervalued properties that I could renovate and improve. My eye for structural problems and energy inefficiencies allowed me to see potential where others saw only problems. College was different. I attended a prestigious engineering program where my autism was seen as an asset rather than a liability. My professors encouraged my intense focus and attention to detail. My classmates respected my expertise and sought my help with their projects. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in civil engineering, But by then, my consulting company had grown into a full-fledged construction and development firm. I was designing buildings, managing construction projects, and developing sustainable communities across the state. The real turning point came when I was 25. I heard that the building where my old middle school was located was being sold. The school district was moving to a new facility, and they were looking for developers to purchase and redevelop the property. I submitted a proposal to buy the building and convert it into a state-of-the-art technology center focused on autism research and support services. My vision was to create a place where neurodivergent individuals could develop their skills, find employment, and contribute to society in meaningful ways. The school board was initially skeptical. They remembered me as the weird kid who had been constantly bullied, not as a successful businessman. But when they saw my portfolio of successful projects and my detailed renovation plans, they had to admit that I was the best candidate for the job. The day I signed the purchase agreement was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I was now the owner of the building where I had been called trash for so many years. But more importantly, I was transforming it into something that would help other neurodivergent individuals avoid the pain and isolation that I had experienced. The renovation took 2 years and cost over $10 million. I personally oversaw every aspect of the project, ensuring that the building was not only structurally sound and energy efficient, but also designed to be autism-friendly. I included sensory-friendly lighting, quiet spaces for individuals who needed to decompress, and adaptive technology to help people with different communication needs. The grand opening was a community celebration. The mayor was there, along with disability advocates, autism researchers, and families affected by autism. Local news stations covered the event, and my story of transformation from bullied outcast to successful entrepreneur was featured in newspapers across the region. But the moment I had been waiting for came when I saw Derek Thompson in the crowd. He was now working for a local marketing firm, and his company had been hired to help promote the technology center. He looked older, more tired, and definitely less confident than the bully I remembered from middle school. When he saw me, his face went pale. I could see the recognition in his eyes, the realization that the kid he had called trash was now his client, his boss, the person who controlled his company's biggest contract. I walked over to him and extended my hand. "Derek," I said calmly, "thank you for being here today." He shook my hand nervously. "Marcus, I wanted to say, about what happened in school." I held up my hand to stop him. "We were kids, Derek. We all made mistakes. What matters now is what we do moving forward." He nodded gratefully, clearly relieved that I wasn't going to humiliate him the way he had humiliated me. But I had learned something important over the years. Success isn't about revenge. It's about proving to yourself and the world that you have value, that you can contribute, that you belong. Today, my company employs over 200 people, including many individuals on the autism spectrum. We've completed projects worth over $100 million and have won numerous awards for innovative design and sustainable construction. The Technology Center has helped hundreds of neurodivergent individuals find employment and develop their skills. But more importantly, I've learned that being autistic isn't something to be ashamed of or hidden. It's a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing the world, and in many cases, it's a significant advantage. My autism allows me to focus intensely on complex problems, to see patterns that others miss, and to develop innovative solutions that neurotypical people might never consider. I still encounter people who don't understand autism, who see it as a limitation or a problem to be fixed. But I've learned to educate rather than hide, to advocate rather than apologize. Every project I complete, every person I employ, every success I achieve is a statement that autism is not a limitation. It's a different kind of strength. The Technology Center now hosts an annual conference on neurodiversity in the workplace, bringing together employers, researchers, and neurodivergent individuals to share best practices and break down barriers. We've helped change the conversation about autism from one of limitations to one of possibilities. Looking back, I realized that Derek and his friends actually did me a favor, though I would never wish that experience on anyone else. Their cruelty forced me to look inward, to find strength in my differences, and to develop resilience that has served me well in business and in life. The word trash no longer has power over me. I've learned that people's opinions of you don't define your worth or your potential. What matters is how you see yourself and what you're willing to do to achieve your goals. To anyone watching this who feels different, who's been bullied, who's been told they don't belong, I want you to know that your differences might be your greatest strengths. The world needs people who think differently, who see patterns others miss, who are willing to challenge conventional wisdom and find new solutions to old problems. Being autistic has taught me that success isn't about fitting in. It's about finding where you belong, developing your unique talents, and contributing to the world in your own way. Every challenge I faced, every insult I endured, every moment of isolation I experienced has made me stronger and more determined to succeed. Today, when I walk through the halls of the Technology Center, I see young people like I used to be, brilliant, creative, passionate individuals who just need someone to believe in them and give them a chance to shine. And I know that no matter what challenges they face, no matter what names they're called, no matter how different they feel, they have the potential to change the world. Because sometimes the people society calls trash are actually the ones who will build the future.